Speculation continues to mount over who's behind the leak of classified defense documents related to U.S. involvement in the war in Ukraine. One former Pentagon official pointed to an inside job in an interview with the Daily Mail. He claims it's the only explanation, as many of the documents were, quote, in U.S. hands. Meanwhile, Ukraine is blaming Russia for the leak. That sounds familiar. According to The Hill, on Sunday, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry's intelligence representatives accused Russia of doctoring the photos via Photoshop. Now, that does appear to be the case. So the reason to think it was a some U.S. official leaked it is that this seems to be the U.S. version of the document that says it's a photograph of the it's photographs of 100 documents that says like for U.S. eyes only. Now, apparently, the only number that was really doctored is an inflation of the Ukrainian casualties. So you might think that would be Russia would have a reason to do that. The documents make it look like Ukraine is not in a great position, which is kind of already known, but I think that it brings that into clearer focus that the Ukrainians have lost a lot of people that, even if we continue to arm them, there are not going to be able-bodied people to take up arms against Russia.
Of course, the counter-argument is that if the Ukrainians aren't doing very well, and if in particular they are not doing well and perhaps experiencing casualties because they don't have enough weaponry support, then that's an argument for Americans giving more lethal aid to the country. This is a position that journalist Aaron Mate has taken, asking, in a tweet, or to promote more weapons. This leak, for example, would make the case for the U.S. to escalate military aid. And when you look at the framing of these leaks by some of the mainstream papers, the Washington Post tweeted out, leaked U.S. military and intelligence documents indicate alarming Ukrainian shortfalls in Western supplied weaponry, especially ammunition and air defense. The New York Times framed it as Ukraine needs a munitions influx to boost its air defense and keep Russia from changing the course of the war, leaked Pentagon documents suggest.
And of course, that's the media's perspective. The reason I don't quite buy that would be the motivation of the leaking party is that why wouldn't they leak this directly to a media outlet then? Like the mechanism of this leak is that these documents sat on Discord for over a month before they were noticed by the media, by government, etc. That honestly suggests like a lack of clarity of purpose behind whoever's doing it. Like if the person doing this leak, if their perspective is I need to drum up public support for this war, then the way you handle this, if you're at all competent, is you would go to someone, a reporter, a very hawkish pro-Ukrainian reporter at the New York Times or the Washington Post, and say, I have bombshell intelligence showing that Ukraine is in danger of falling unless the U.S. commits massive more resources to it. I'm going to share this scoop with you. That would be the framing of the story. Yeah. That would be, it just kind of sat there until it got attention. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they should give it to the guys who wrote about the Nord Stream yacht.
Sure, right, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, but
maybe the leaker doesn't know that, but
well, on the other side of it, though, it is difficult for me to see really what the Russian interests are here. And of course, there's other parties in the world beyond America.
Well, yes, in fact, we share intelligence with Canada, Australia, New Zealand. That's called the Five Eyes. We have an agreement to share intelligence. Those people are all furious about this because they think the U.S. can't be trusted. But of course, it could very well be a leak from one of their intelligence agencies as well.
There's also an argument. There has been a lot of scrutiny from a lot of left reporters like Aaron Mate about the relationship, the cozy relationship that seems to exist between U.S. intelligence agencies and these newspapers.
Yes.
And it could be the case that putting that little bit of extra distance, saying, oh, we found it on a Discord, is a way to undermine the presumption that they're basically just printing out, deep state reports as news. But it does feel as though, I understand the argument that this helps Russia's negotiating position if Ukraine is perceived to be not doing very well. But even in the framing of these articles, like the Washington Post tweet that I read, I cut it off before the end, where they say, there are these weapons shortfalls quote, even as Ukraine shows even as there is deep American penetration into Russian plans, equipment, and manpower, even as America is doing the thing, there's still a very positive, I think, perhaps overly rosy picture of what Ukraine is up to.
My perspective is, like, the American people they're paying for this. They just deserve the truth. We deserve to know exactly what the state of the reality of the war is in Ukraine, whatever our government thinks it is. We deserve to know that. So I'm happy that this leak shows us that the Ukrainian position is not as strong as our government has concluded. Now, if the American people think this is a really important thing and we should commit all the resources available to continuing this war, okay, fine. I wouldn't agree with that. And in fact, the American people don't agree with that either.
Right.
What this shows is that the Biden administration's policy of whatever it takes, as long as it takes, does not make any sense. There should be a ceasefire immediately, even if that solidifies Russia controlling the part of Ukraine that it has under its control now. Remember, the Biden administration said they're totally unwilling. There should be no ceasefire, right, because they don't want to give any legitimacy to the 17% of the country that it's under Russian control. That's what it was at the time the ceasefire was being considered. That is not a good strategy, because Russia can still commit resources to this. We could eventually have to accept a ceasefire when they control the entire country.
Right. Well,
let's not get to that point.
You brought up the perspective of the American people. They are overwhelmingly not for increased military aid to Ukraine. However, in a new interview, House Leader Kevin McCarthy threw his weight behind the Biden administration's continuing support of the war in Ukraine. This is a stark about-face from last year when he pledged to halt the administration's commitment to sending blank checks overseas. Let's watch.
What's happening in Ukraine is an atrocity, and I think Ukraine, not just Ukraine, the world has to win there. What Russia has done is wrong. In a phrase that I use, a blank check, I use that for anything. I look at every dollar of taxpayers that we would use, but the one thing I know that in Ukraine we have to win, because it also would save Taiwan at the same time.
Yeah, that's not encouraging at all, given the commitments he made to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz when he was running for Speaker. He said he would take this seriously. Look, it's not as simple as winning or losing. It's going to be kind of winning and kind of losing. Like, that's the reality of war, because we're not going to topple Vladimir Putin's government. We're not committing our own troops. We're not declaring war on Russia. You want to do that? You want to have war with Russia? Of course not. They're not voting for that.
Yeah.
I understand that Ukraine is the victims of what's happening here. But my perspective would be, let's bring this to an end as soon as possible, even if that is not the absolutely ideal win for Ukraine and for the Western world, which is especially what Republican voters want. Yeah. The people who put him there, the people who gave him the House majority position, the Speaker position, want, as he said, not a blank check, but then he kind of says, well, but we have to win.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
exactly
but this is a critique a lot of folks have been making, a lot of independents, I can speak only from my position in the left chair, a lot of leftists have been making, that as much as it might be true that there are more anti-war voices and among elected officials on the right, the leadership of the Republican Party is, as it always has been, very pro-war, as is the leadership of the Democratic Party. The two corporate systems are not getting you out of a war posture. And the allusion to Taiwan, the implication that this, unless we give a blank check to Ukraine, unless there is an endless funding and support for Ukraine, that it sends a signal that we're not willing to go to World War III over Taiwan. What is the flip side of that? That we 100% are going to enter into a conflict potentially with China over time. I mean, this is the posture that everybody is ready for, and why so many people have been skeptical of this idea that there is a genuine anti-war commitment. A lot of folks have been saying that conservatives have been slowly pivoting from a war in Ukraine to a war with China, and that is an escalation, not a de-escalation as it's been framed so far. People have to keep their eyes on the ball.
Kevin McCarthy wasn't even doing an either or there. He was doing a both and.
Both and, exactly. Yeah.
Don't like to see it. More Rising right after this.